Hey everyone! If you enjoy these story videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world and keeps us creating more amazing stories every week. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The scent of pine and crisp autumn air hung heavy around the charming, slightly ramshackle cabin nestled deep in the Green Mountains of Vermont. This was the annual Dawson family pilgrimage, a cherished tradition that usually brought a mixture of joy, exasperation, and inevitable arguments. This year, however, held a special significance. Harold Dawson, the family patriarch, was turning a venerable 90. Maggie Dawson, a woman whose vibrant silver hair and impeccably tailored athleisure were belied her 65 years, bustled about the rustic kitchen. Her phone, a gleaming new model she'd mastered with surprising alacrity, lay strategically near the vintage ceramic cookie jar. Maggie was, in her own words, aggressively social media savvy, a phrase she'd coined after her grandkids tried to explain digital native. She posted daily about her morning power walks, her award-winning petunias, and occasionally, thinly veiled critiques of modern life under the hashtag back in my day. Everything's gone soft, she'd often lament, scrolling through TikToks of young people struggling with basic carpentry. Kids these days, they expect everything handed to them on a silver platter. She believed firmly that the past held the keys to all solutions, a golden era where common sense reigned supreme and people actually talked to each other, face to face. Her daughter, Chloe Dawson, 30 and perpetually looking like she'd just run a marathon, which, given her life, wasn't far from the truth, sighed deeply as she attempted to assemble a gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free birthday cake for Harold. Her own phone, its screen cracked in 3 places from various toddler-induced tumbles, buzzed incessantly with work emails and notifications from her children's school. Chloe was a whirlwind of motion, juggling a demanding marketing job, a boisterous 10-year-old daughter named Emma, a perpetually curious baby, and a well-meaning but often clueless husband. "Mom, can you please pass the oat milk from the top shelf?" she asked, her voice tight with a mixture of fatigue and the ever-present hum of low-level anxiety that defined modern motherhood. She caught her mother's disapproving glance at the oat milk carton. Maggie, a staunch advocate for whole milk and traditional butter, viewed such dietary fads with a mixture of amusement and thinly veiled contempt. "Oat milk," Maggie sniffed, retrieving the carton with an exaggerated stretch. "Honestly, Chloe, whatever happened to good old cow's milk? All these fancy alternatives, it's just big food trying to sell you overpriced water." Chloe pinched the bridge of her nose. "Mom, it's for allergy reasons, and sometimes it's just a personal preference. Not everything has to be a grand conspiracy." 10-year-old Emma, a bright-eyed girl whose current obsession was amateur magic tricks and ancient folklore, peered over the kitchen island, diligently polishing a smooth, gray river stone. "Grandma, do you think real magic exists?" she asked, her voice hushed with wonder. "Like spells and potions and stuff?" Maggie chuckled, a sound that always managed to convey both affection and a touch of condescension. "Honey, the only magic your grandma believes in is a good scrubbing brush and a strong cup of coffee. Now, if you want to make yourself useful, how about setting the table? And please, no phones at dinner." Emma dutifully put down her stone, but her eyes, brimming with a vivid imagination, darted towards a particularly ornate, tarnished brass lamp sitting on a dusty side table in the living room. It was an antique, picked up by Harold decades ago at a Vermont flea market, mostly serving as a conversation starter rather than actual illumination. To Emma, it looked suspiciously like something a genie might pop out of. Harold, meanwhile, was doing what he did best, napping in his favorite armchair by the crackling fireplace, a faint snore escaping his lips. His 87 years had mostly been peaceful, punctuated by long naps and surprisingly astute observations when he was awake. He had a knack for waking up just long enough to utter a profound truth or an embarrassingly accurate assessment of someone's inner thoughts before drifting off again. Suddenly, the front door burst open and a flurry of bright pink hair and an almost invisible face, obscured by a massive pair of headphones, entered the cabin. This was Riley, Chloe's 18-year-old niece, Maggie's granddaughter. Riley was a creature of the digital age, her thumbs perpetually dancing across her phone screen, her interaction with the adult world limited to grunts and monosyllabic answers. She barely looked up as she navigated the living room, a human-shaped satellite orbiting her device. "Riley, put that thing away," Maggie commanded, her voice sharp. "We have family visiting. Go say hello to your aunt and cousin." Riley offered a noncommittal shrug, her fingers still flying. "Later, Grandma. Just finishing this level." The cabin, usually a sanctuary of peace, began to hum with the familiar tension of a multi-generational gathering. The birthday dinner itself was a delicious, if slightly chaotic, affair. Harold, after a brief awakening to declare the mashed potatoes fluffier than a cloud, had promptly fallen back asleep, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. It was during dessert, as Chloe spoon-fed the baby pureed sweet potato and simultaneously tried to respond to an urgent work email on her phone, that the inevitable clash occurred. Maggie, watching Chloe multitask with a mixture of fascination and horror, finally couldn't hold back. "Chloe, for heaven's sake, put that phone away," Maggie exclaimed, her voice cutting through the general chatter. "Can't you just enjoy a family meal? You're always glued to that thing, just like Riley." Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Mom, I'm trying to juggle work, a baby, and a household. I don't have the luxury of sitting around knitting doilies all day. My work doesn't stop just because it's dinner time. And for your information, this thing is how I keep our lives running." "Exactly," Maggie retorted, slamming her hand lightly on the table, making the cutlery jump. "That's the problem with your generation. Too much screen time, too much instant gratification, no real grit. You're all lazy, constantly on your phones, expecting life to be an Instagram filter. Back in my day, we actually worked for things." Chloe felt a wave of indignation wash over her. "Lazy? Mom, I haven't slept more than 5 consecutive hours in 3 years. And back in your day, people were terrified of anything new. You resisted every change, every innovation, clinging to the past like a barnacle. You moved at a snail's pace while the world was speeding by." The argument escalated, their voices rising, drawing worried glances from Emma and eye rolls from Riley, who had momentarily paused her game to observe the spectacle. "I just wish you'd understand how hard it is to be a mother in this day and age." Chloe finally burst out, her voice cracking with frustration. The constant demands, the judgment, the pressure to be perfect. Maggie threw her hands up in exasperation. "And I wish you understood how difficult it was for my generation, raising children without all your fancy gadgets, with less support, and still trying to maintain some semblance of order and common sense. I wish you knew how difficult it is to be a mother, period." Their eyes locked across the table, a furious, frustrated stare down. In that charged moment, both women, consumed by their anger and mutual incomprehension, uttered nearly identical wishes. "I wish you understood me better." Chloe seethed, almost simultaneously with Maggie's equally fierce, "I wish you knew how hard it is to be a mother." And then, as if on cue, the ancient brass lamp on the dusty side table in the living room, the one Harold had bought at a flea market and everyone assumed was just a quirky piece of decor, pulsed with a faint, ethereal glow. A wisp of iridescent smoke, barely perceptible, curled from its spout, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. No one noticed it, not even Emma, who was momentarily distracted by a crumb that looked suspiciously like a tiny dragon. The air around Maggie and Chloe tingled, a strange, almost electric sensation. They both felt a sudden, profound dizziness, a lurching sensation deep in their stomachs, like a roller coaster plummeting unexpectedly. For a fleeting second, the world seemed to warp around them, colors shifting, sounds muffling. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. They blinked, looking at each other, the anger still simmering, but now laced with a flicker of confusion. The dizziness subsided, leaving only the lingering resentment of their argument. Harold stirred in his armchair, opening one eye. He gazed at the lamp, then at Maggie and Chloe, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his wrinkled face. "Looks like someone's about to learn a lesson," he mumbled, before drifting back into a gentle snore. Neither Maggie nor Chloe heard him. They were too busy seething, too lost in their own righteous indignation, completely oblivious to the magical shift that had just occurred. The night wore on, the family eventually dispersing to their respective rooms, the argument hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge. Little did they know, the next morning would dawn on a reality far stranger than any of them could have imagined. The first sign that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong wasn't the reflection in the mirror, but the feeling. Maggie Dawson woke with a jolt, not to the familiar, comforting ache of her 65-year-old joints, but to a peculiar stiffness in her neck she hadn't felt in decades. It was a tension headache, the kind she used to get after a sleepless night with a teething baby. And speaking of babies, what was that faint, rhythmic gurgling sound coming from the crib beside the bed? Her eyes snapped open, and she immediately noticed two things. The room was a chaotic explosion of bright plastic toys and discarded baby wipes, not her meticulously tidy, minimalist cabin bedroom. And her hand, reaching out to rub her temple, was different. Younger. Smoother. With perfectly manicured, chip-free nails painted a tasteful pastel pink, a shade she'd always considered a bit too youthful for herself. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She scrambled out of bed, her limbs feeling strangely unfamiliar, light and responsive in a way they hadn't been since her 40s. A high-pitched wail erupted from the crib. "Oh, good heavens," she muttered, the voice that emerged from her throat sounding higher. Younger. Chloe's voice. She stumbled towards the full-length mirror leaning against the far wall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. What she saw there made her gasp, a sound that was definitely Chloe's. Staring back at her was Chloe's reflection, 30 years old, hair slightly disheveled from sleep, dark circles under the eyes, wearing a faded old t-shirt with a cartoon dog. It was unmistakably Chloe. And yet Maggie knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was inside this body. "No, no, this can't be happening," she whispered, her hands flying to her face, touching skin that was smooth and firm, not the familiar, gently wrinkled landscape she'd known for decades. Her mind reeled. The argument last night, the furious wishes, the strange glow from Harold's lamp. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Meanwhile, across the hall in Maggie's bedroom, Chloe Dawson was experiencing her own terrifying revelation. She woke up feeling strangely refreshed, her usual morning exhaustion replaced by an almost unnerving lightness. Her body, usually a battleground of aches and pains from carrying a toddler and endless errands, felt robust. She stretched, and not a single joint popped. This was new. She opened her eyes to the sight of an impeccably organized room, antique furniture, and a pristine white duvet. Not her usual overflowing laundry basket and toy-strewn floor. And her hand, resting on the luxurious duvet, was wrinkled. The skin thin and papery. With a large, ornate silver ring on her middle finger, a ring she knew belonged to her mother. A jolt of adrenaline shot through her. She sat bolt upright, her vision surprisingly clear without her usual reading glasses. She swung her legs out of bed, and her feet, usually aching from standing all day, landed firmly on the plush carpet. Her slippers, sitting neatly beside the bed, were a sensible, orthopedic-looking pair she would never own. She stumbled to the full-length mirror on the closet door, her movements feeling oddly stiff, almost formal. The reflection that greeted her made her yelp, a sound that was distinctly Maggie's. Staring back was her mother, 65 years old, with perfectly coiffed silver hair, alert blue eyes, and wearing a crisp, floral nightgown that Chloe recognized as one of Maggie's favorites. It was unmistakably Maggie. And yet, Chloe knew, with a growing sense of dread, that she was inside this body. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, her voice gravelly and precise, exactly like her mother's. "This is a nightmare. A horrible, impossible nightmare." Her fingers, now belonging to Maggie, flew to her face, touching the familiar lines around the eyes, the slightly looser skin of the jaw. She pinched herself hard, hoping to wake up, but the pain was real, Maggie's pain, a dull throb in the arm she'd just bruised. Back in Chloe's room, Maggie was already facing her first challenge in her new body, a crying baby. She looked into the crib to see her youngest grandchild, barely a year old, red-faced and squalling. "Oh, you poor dear," she cooed, her voice sounding entirely alien to her own ears. "What's the matter, little one?" She reached down to pick up the baby, feeling a strange mix of terror and instinct. Her younger body responded with surprising ease, scooping up the child with a practiced motion she hadn't performed in decades. The baby instantly quieted, snuggling into her shoulder. Then, disaster struck. The baby let out a loud burp, followed by a torrent of vomit down the front of Chloe's favorite t-shirt. Maggie, in Chloe's body, stared down at the mess in disbelief. Good heavens! Is this what Chloe deals with every morning? Her disdain for modern parenting, which she'd voiced so loudly the night before, suddenly felt very, very real. She fumbled for a changing table, a diaper, wipes, her mind a whirlwind of information she hadn't needed since the 1980s. This was going to be much harder than she thought. And then Chloe's smartphone, sitting on the bedside table amidst a pile of children's books, began to vibrate, a relentless, insistent buzzing. An alarm, followed by a notification, reminder, 8 a.m., work sync call. Maggie's eyes widened. Work? At this hour? On a Sunday? She picked up the phone, her fingers feeling clumsy on the smooth glass. The sheer volume of apps, notifications, and unread messages was overwhelming. A cascade of information assaulted her senses. A text from a colleague, urgent, campaign proposal needs final review by 9. An email from Emma's school, parent-teacher conference reminder. A notification from the baby monitor app, baby's awake, audio only. She stared at the screen, a foreign language of emojis and acronyms. This was the life Chloe lived? This constant digital barrage? It was a far cry from her peaceful mornings of crossword puzzles and gardening. Her head began to throb. Meanwhile, Chloe, trapped in Maggie's body, was grappling with her own set of unfamiliar challenges. First, the clothes. Maggie's closet was a sea of sensible slacks, twin sets, and floral blouses. Nothing that Chloe, with her modern, slightly edgy style, would ever be caught dead in. "I have to go to work in this," she muttered, holding up a lavender cardigan. She thought about her favorite leather jacket, her comfortable jeans. Now, they were on a 30-year-old body, somewhere else. She tried to brush her teeth, but the dentures felt strange in her mouth. And her hair, Maggie's perfectly coiffed, sprayed into submission silver bob, felt utterly foreign. She tried to run her fingers through it, only to find it stiff and unyielding. How does she even do this? Chloe wondered, looking at the intricate hairstyle. Then came the phone. Maggie's phone, equally new and intimidating, sat on her nightstand. Chloe picked it up, expecting her usual deluge of notifications. Instead, she found a meticulously curated Instagram feed of gardening tips, a few posts from her friends about bridge games, and a surprisingly active Pinterest board dedicated to cozy cabin decor. No work emails. No school alerts. Just peace. But that peace was short-lived. A notification popped up. Upcoming bridge tournament. Don't forget your partner. Chloe's eyes widened. Bridge? Her mother played bridge? And then a text from one of Maggie's friends. Don't forget our early bird special at the spa, Maggie. Our facial appointments are at 10 a.m. Spa. Chloe croaked, her Maggie voice sounding incredulous. She was supposed to be preparing for a major client pitch, not getting a facial. Her entire life, her identity, her responsibilities, all were tied to a 30-year-old body that was currently wrestling with a baby and a digital overload. Just then, a knock came at the door. "Mom? Are you awake?" It was Emma's voice, bright and full of morning energy. Chloe, in Maggie's body, panicked. Yes, darling. Just getting ready." She quickly tried to compose herself, wondering how she was going to explain this. Her mother usually had a specific morning routine, a certain cheerful yet firm demeanor. Chloe, still reeling from the shock, felt utterly unprepared. Across the hall, Maggie, now in Chloe's body, heard a different voice. "Mommy? Baby is crying." It was Emma again, her little footsteps approaching. Maggie quickly tried to tidy the baby, her mind racing. How was she going to pretend to be Chloe, the multitasking modern mother, when she could barely navigate a smartphone? The stage was set for an epic, utterly ridiculous performance. Two women, trapped in each other's lives, about to face a family that had no idea of the magical mishap. The only one who seemed to have any inkling, Harold, was still blissfully asleep, his enigmatic smile hinting at secrets only he understood. The chaos for both Maggie and Chloe was just beginning. The morning after the switch was a masterclass in controlled pandemonium. Maggie, inhabiting Chloe's 30-year-old body, stumbled out of the bedroom, the baby now strapped precariously to her front in a carrier she couldn't quite figure out. Her normally impeccable silver hair was, of course, gone, replaced by Chloe's slightly frizzy, shoulder-length brown hair, which she'd attempted to tame with a hair tie but mostly succeeded in creating a lopsided bun. She was wearing Chloe's oversized band t-shirt and yoga pants, a stark contrast to her usual tailored attire. Her face, Chloe's face, was pale with stress. "Morning, Mom," Emma chirped, already at the kitchen table, devouring a bowl of sugary cereal. She paused, spoon halfway to her mouth, and eyed Maggie as Chloe, critically. "Mommy, you look tired. And your hair is weird." Maggie forced a smile, Chloe's smile feeling alien on her face. "Just a rough night, sweetie. You know, baby things." She gestured vaguely at the cooing infant, hoping it sounded convincing. She spotted Chloe's neglected smartphone on the counter, glowing with dozens of unread notifications. The sheer volume of digital demands was a physical weight. Meanwhile, Chloe, trapped in Maggie's 65-year-old body, made her grand entrance. She had tried, truly tried, to inject some of her own style into Maggie's wardrobe, but it was a losing battle. She'd settled on a pair of Maggie's sensible beige trousers and a floral blouse that, on Maggie, looked classic, but on Chloe, felt like a costume. Her silver hair, Maggie's silver hair, was immaculately coiffed, sprayed into a helmet-like perfection that Chloe found utterly suffocating. Her face, Maggie's face, was set in a mask of determined cheerfulness. "Good morning, everyone," Chloe, as Maggie, announced, her voice Maggie's, resonant and clear. She felt a phantom ache in her lower back, a new sensation that came with her borrowed 65-year-old frame. She spotted Chloe's usual morning coffee mug, a chipped, sarcastic-looking world's okayest mom mug, and recoiled. Instead, she poured herself a cup from Maggie's pristine ceramic set. The first few hours were a dance of deception, a precarious tightrope walk of trying to mimic the other's habits without giving themselves away. Maggie, in Chloe's body, discovered the sheer mental load of modern motherhood. She had to navigate Emma's school portal, a labyrinthine system of logins and passwords, to check on a forgotten homework assignment. Good heavens, a child needs a dedicated IT department just to go to school these days, she muttered under her breath, Chloe's exasperated sigh escaping her lips. Then came the work emails. A deluge of urgent requests, client demands, and team meetings. She had no idea what half the acronyms meant, let alone how to respond professionally. She tried to type a reply, but her fingers, accustomed to a slower, more deliberate pace, fumbled on the tiny smartphone keyboard. "Chloe, can you please tell me how to access your work cloud?" Maggie asked, struggling with a laptop. Chloe, in Maggie's body, nearly choked on her organic green smoothie, a concession to Chloe's health-conscious lifestyle, which she was now forced to adopt. "Mom, it's not a cloud you physically access. It's an online storage system. Just log in with my username and password, then navigate to the shared drive." She felt a surge of her own typical irritation, intensified by the unfamiliar sensation of Maggie's calm, measured breathing. Riley, the perpetually phone-addicted teenager, finally emerged from her room, her face still glued to her screen. She plopped down at the table, oblivious to the simmering tension. "Grandma, can you make me a smoothie?" "The one with the kale and the spirulina," she mumbled, her eyes still fixed on her phone. Chloe, as Maggie, froze. She knew exactly which smoothie Riley meant, Chloe's signature detox blast. But Maggie never made it. Maggie made milkshakes. Certainly, darling, Chloe, as Maggie said, her voice sounding oddly strained. She marched to the blender, trying to remember the precise ratios of green sludge. This was going to be an adventure. Maggie, as Chloe, watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as her mother fumbled with the blender, nearly spilling kale powder everywhere. "Mom, you need to add the liquid first," she blurted out, her instincts kicking in. Then she remembered. She was Chloe. She shouldn't be giving her mother instructions. The awkwardness reached a peak when Maggie, as Chloe, had to prepare lunch for Emma and the baby. She attempted to make Emma's favorite elaborate, themed bento box, a skill Chloe had perfected. The result was a sad, lopsided sandwich and some fruit cut into vaguely animalistic shapes. Emma stared at it with suspicion. "Mommy, did you forget the unicorn sprinkles?" "Unicorn sprinkles?" Maggie, as Chloe, repeated, aghast. "What on earth are unicorn sprinkles?" Chloe, as Maggie, stepped in smoothly, retrieving a container of glittery, edible sprinkles from a hidden compartment in the pantry. "Oh, darling, your mother must be tired. Here you go." She winked at Emma, hoping to salvage the situation, while simultaneously wondering why Maggie had a hidden compartment for sprinkles. The charade continued throughout the day. Maggie, as Chloe, attempted to do a load of laundry, only to discover the complex settings of Chloe's high-tech washing machine. "Delicates? Permanent press? Good heavens, just wash the clothes," she muttered, nearly flooding the utility room. She also struggled with the baby's nap schedule, mixing up feeding times and sleep cues, leading to a thoroughly confused and irritable infant. Chloe, as Maggie, on the other hand, found herself drawn into Maggie's social calendar. "Maggie, dear, don't forget your Pilates class at 2 p.m., a text from a friend chirped. Pilates? Chloe usually preferred high-intensity interval training. She envisioned herself in a room full of graceful, elderly women, attempting impossible stretches. The thought filled her with dread. Later that afternoon, a flurry of activity erupted as Maggie's friends arrived for their weekly bridge game. Chloe, as Maggie, found herself surrounded by 4 impeccably dressed women, all eager to discuss local gossip and, of course, the intricate rules of bridge. Chloe, who barely understood poker, was completely lost. She tried to bluff her way through, making nonsensical bids and accidentally calling her partner's hand adorable. The women exchanged puzzled glances. "Maggie, dear, are you feeling quite all right?" one of them, Mrs. Henderson, asked kindly. "You seem distracted." "Never better," Chloe, as Maggie, declared, forcing a loud, hearty laugh that made her voice sound even more like Maggie's. She then tried to subtly check Maggie's phone for bridge rules, but Maggie's phone only offered tutorials for online bridge, which didn't help with the real-life card game in front of her. Back inside, Maggie, as Chloe, was wrestling with Chloe's laptop, trying to finish the work presentation that was due first thing Monday. She clicked on a file, and a cascade of TikTok videos popped up. Chloe's work computer was filled with dance challenges, viral recipes, and short, snappy comedic skits. Maggie, in her exasperation, accidentally clicked record and found herself staring at her own reflection, Chloe's face, looking utterly bewildered. "Good heavens, what is this contraption?" Maggie, as Chloe, muttered, unaware that she was now filming herself. She then, with the frankness that was so characteristic of her true self, began to rant about the absurdity of modern work, the unrealistic expectations placed on young mothers, and the baffling trend of filming oneself doing silly dances. "Back in my day," she declared to the camera, "we actually had a private life. And we certainly didn't broadcast every single thought to the entire world." She fumbled with the controls, trying to stop the recording, and accidentally hit post. The video, a raw, unedited, utterly authentic rant from Chloe about the woes of modern life, complete with a baby gurgling in the background and a chaotic kitchen, was unleashed upon the internet. Within minutes, Chloe's phone, which Maggie, as Chloe, was still holding, began to vibrate with an intensity she hadn't yet experienced. Notifications exploded across the screen. "New follower. Your video is trending." Viral hit. 100K views. Maggie stared at the screen, utterly bewildered. She had just become an accidental viral sensation, a hot mom with 1 million views, all because she had spoken her mind in Chloe's body. Meanwhile, Riley, who had finally looked up from her phone to grab a snack, caught a glimpse of her mother's viral video. She nearly dropped her phone. "Mom, what did you do?" she shrieked, showing the video to Chloe as Maggie. Chloe, as Maggie, watched the video of her own body, inhabited by her mother, ranting about social media, and then saw the explosion of comments. "This mom gets it. So relatable." Finally, some real talk. She felt a strange mix of horror and a grudging respect for her mother's unintentional honesty. This was going to be a very, very long day. The switch had brought not just a change of bodies, but a complete upheaval of their carefully constructed lives, pushing them into roles they never thought they'd play. And the outside world, completely unaware, was about to be utterly bewildered by the Dawson women. The viral video was just the beginning of the absurdity. Maggie, in Chloe's body, found herself plunged into the bewildering world of instant fame. Notifications continued to ping relentlessly. Chloe was now being called a relatable queen, a refreshing voice, and the unfiltered mom we all needed. People loved her raw, unpolished take on the struggles of modern life, delivered with Maggie's no-nonsense bluntness through Chloe's tired but expressive face. Maggie, holding Chloe's constantly buzzing phone, felt a strange mix of terror and a peculiar, almost exhilarating, thrill. Her initial disdain for social media was slowly giving way to a grudging fascination. She found herself scrolling through the comments, a tiny, unfamiliar smile playing on Chloe's lips. "They actually listened to what I have to say," she thought, a spark of recognition for the power of this new medium taking root. She even tried to make another video, attempting to replicate her accidental success, but her forced cheerfulness felt flat, and she accidentally uploaded a 5-minute clip of the baby drooling. It didn't go viral. Meanwhile, Chloe, in Maggie's body, was struggling to maintain the illusion of being her mother. Her phone, Maggie's phone, was blissfully quiet on the social media front, but her social calendar was a relentless succession of luncheons, charity committee meetings, and senior fitness classes. She found herself trying to politely decline a senior Zumba invitation, only to be met with Maggie's friend, Carol, raising an eyebrow. "Maggie, you love Zumba. You're the one who taught us that hip-hop routine." Chloe, whose idea of exercise was chasing after a toddler, reluctantly donned Maggie's brightly colored activewear and endured an hour of energetic, if slightly off-kilter, hip-hop moves, all while trying to mimic Maggie's infectious enthusiasm. She felt every single one of Maggie's 65 years in her joints, a stark contrast to her own 30-year-old body's resilience. The experience left her breathless and aching in places she didn't know existed. The family, now aware of the viral video and the bizarre changes in both Maggie and Chloe, was forced into a covert operation. Emma, with her inquisitive nature, was the first to voice her suspicions. "Mommy," she asked Maggie, as Chloe, "how come you knew Grandma's secret recipe for that green smoothie, but you forgot the unicorn sprinkles for my sandwich?" Maggie, as Chloe, fumbled for an answer. Well, sometimes a mom's brain just gets a little jumbled. And Grandma and we've been sharing recipes." Riley, ever the astute observer despite her phone addiction, confronted Chloe as Maggie. "Grandma, why are you suddenly telling me to wear my ripped jeans and try that new filter on TikTok? You usually yell at me for even looking at my phone." Chloe, as Maggie, tried to maintain composure. "Well, Riley, a grandmother can evolve. I've been doing some research, and I think it's important to understand the youth of today." She then attempted a peace sign, but her Maggie hands felt stiff and awkward, resulting in a slightly alarming claw-like gesture. The most difficult part of the charade was explaining away the sudden personality shifts to other family members who called. Chloe, as Maggie, had to answer calls from Maggie's sisters, discussing ailments and upcoming church bake sales with an unfamiliar enthusiasm, occasionally interjecting with a surprisingly progressive political opinion that left her aunts slightly stunned. Maggie, as Chloe, had to field calls from Chloe's husband, Mark, who was away on a business trip. "Hey babe, how's it going?" Mark's cheerful, slightly goofy voice came through the phone. "Everything okay with the little one? And did you remember to transfer money for the new patio furniture?" Maggie, in Chloe's body, nearly dropped the phone. She had no idea about patio furniture, let alone how to transfer money online. "Everything's splendid, Marky darling," she said, forcing a cheerful tone. "Just a bit busy with, mom things. And yes, the money is being transferred." She then spent 20 panicked minutes trying to navigate Chloe's banking app, eventually giving up and hoping for the best. The strain of living a double life began to take its toll. Maggie, as Chloe, was utterly exhausted by the relentless demands of a working mother: early morning feedings, school runs, endless errands, and the constant digital tether to her job. She found herself staring at Chloe's laptop screen, trying to make sense of complex marketing strategies, her brain feeling like it was wading through treacle. She missed her quiet mornings, her gardening, her leisurely chats with friends. The sheer loneliness of Chloe's isolated, frantic existence began to weigh on her. Chloe's friends, mostly other busy moms, communicated in fragmented texts and emojis, a stark contrast to Maggie's long, in-person conversations. Maggie felt a pang of unexpected empathy for her daughter. Conversely, Chloe, in Maggie's body, felt a strange sense of liberation from her usual responsibilities. Her body might be older, but her mind was free from the constant pressure. She enjoyed the slower pace, the long, uninterrupted conversations, even if they were about bridge. She found herself lingering over her morning coffee, reading the actual newspaper, a luxury she hadn't afforded herself in years. She even found a strange joy in Maggie's gardening, tending to the petunias with a focus she usually reserved for complex work projects. However, the physical limitations of Maggie's body were a constant reminder of her predicament. Her back ached, her knees creaked, and she found herself feeling tired much earlier than usual. She missed the boundless energy of her younger self, the ability to simply do things without a second thought. She also missed her children desperately. Seeing them through Maggie's eyes as a grandmother was a profoundly different experience. One afternoon, Maggie, as Chloe, was attempting to fold laundry, a mountain of tiny baby clothes and Emma's mismatched socks, when she found herself drawn to a stack of old photo albums. They were Chloe's, filled with pictures of her childhood. Maggie saw herself, a younger Maggie, beaming with pride at Chloe's school plays, holding her hand on family vacations. She saw the joy, the sacrifice, the deep, abiding love. A wave of unexpected emotion washed over her. Chloe had always been her spirited, independent child, and Maggie had often struggled to understand her choices. Now, seeing Chloe's life from the inside, Maggie felt a deep, profound understanding blossoming within her. At the same time, Chloe, as Maggie, was sitting on the porch swing, watching Emma play in the yard. Riley, surprisingly, had put down her phone and was gently pushing the baby's swing. Chloe, in Maggie's body, watched her own children, a perspective she'd never had. She saw Emma's boundless energy, her imaginative games, her innocent questions. She saw the baby's pure joy, the way Riley interacted with her little sister with unexpected tenderness. She also saw the little anxieties that had always plagued Maggie, the unspoken worries about her children and grandchildren, the desire to protect them, to guide them. Chloe realized that her mother's old-fashioned advice often came from a place of deep love and concern, even if it was delivered with a judgmental tone. Maggie wasn't trying to control her, she was trying to help. The day ended with a bizarre dinner. Maggie, as Chloe, had managed to whip up a surprisingly edible meal, drawing on long-forgotten culinary instincts from her younger days. Chloe, as Maggie, regaled the family with a surprisingly witty, for Maggie, anecdote about her Zumba class, while subtly trying to convince Riley to spend less time on her phone. As Harold, still mostly dozing, mumbled something about the folly of youth and the wisdom of age needing a meeting, Maggie and Chloe exchanged a glance across the table. For the first time since the switch, there was something beyond frustration and panic in their eyes. There was a glimmer of understanding. The experiences of the day, difficult and outlandish as they were, had begun to chip away at their long-held assumptions about each other. They were starting to walk a mile in each other's shoes, quite literally, and the view was far more complex and illuminating than either of them had anticipated. The true learning and the real challenges, however, were yet to come. The days that followed continued the strange charade, each new experience chipping away at the women's preconceived notions. Maggie, in Chloe's body, found herself utterly submerged in the digital currents of Chloe's life. The constant pressure of her daughter's marketing job was a revelation. She sat at Chloe's laptop, squinting at spreadsheets and campaign analytics, her brain aching with the effort. "Good heavens, how does one even understand these metrics?" she muttered, Chloe's voice sounding exasperated. She discovered that Chloe's work involved not just strategic thinking, but a relentless need to be always on, responsive to emails at all hours, and constantly innovating in a rapidly changing landscape. The idea of punching out at 5 and leaving work behind seemed like a distant, impossible dream for Chloe. Maggie began to truly appreciate the relentless demands placed on this generation of working parents. She also delved deeper into Chloe's viral TikTok fame. The comments section, initially a source of bewilderment, slowly became a source of connection. People resonated with her accidental rants, sharing their own struggles. Maggie, speaking through Chloe's face, began to offer surprisingly insightful, if still slightly curmudgeonly, advice. "You know," she posted in a follow-up video, Chloe's face serious, but with a hint of Maggie's inherent wisdom. "Back in my day, we didn't have all these screens, but the pressure to be perfect? That's not new. Just remember, you're doing better than you think." The video, surprisingly, went even more viral, cementing Chloe's status as the straight-talking hot mom. Maggie found herself accidentally becoming an influencer, dispensing wisdom from a bygone era into the digital ether. Chloe, meanwhile, in Maggie's body, was forced to confront the quieter, yet equally demanding, realities of Maggie's life. She attended a book club meeting where the discussion revolved around classic literature and local politics, a far cry from her usual conversations about school policies and marketing trends. She found herself enjoying the intellectual stimulation, the thoughtful debates, and the genuine camaraderie among Maggie's friends. She realized that Maggie's life wasn't just about bridge and gardening, it was about community, connection, and a certain measured pace that allowed for deeper engagement. However, the physical toll was real. Chloe's young mind felt trapped in a body that moved slower, tired faster, and had its own set of aches and pains. She struggled with simple tasks, like opening a tightly sealed jar or climbing the stairs without a slight groan. She found herself taking naps in the afternoon, something she hadn't done since she was a baby herself. This new physical reality made her understand Maggie's occasional slowness, her preference for comfort, and her need for quiet moments. It wasn't laziness, it was the reality of aging. One particularly challenging day, Maggie, as Chloe, had a major presentation for Chloe's job. It was for a crucial client, and the fate of a major campaign rested on its success. Maggie, despite her newfound digital savvy, was terrified. She meticulously prepared, using all of Chloe's notes, trying to channel her daughter's professional demeanor. She wore Chloe's most power suit outfit, a chic blazer and tailored trousers, but felt like she was playing dress-up. During the video conference, she delivered the presentation with Maggie's characteristic directness, occasionally interjecting with a slightly anachronistic phrase like, "This idea has real legs." The clients, surprisingly, found her refreshingly authentic. "Chloe, you have a unique voice," one client praised. Maggie, in Chloe's body, felt a surge of pride she hadn't anticipated. She was succeeding not as Chloe, but as herself, operating within Chloe's world. Simultaneously, Chloe, as Maggie, had a surprise encounter. While at the local farmer's market, enjoying the slower pace and the fresh produce, she ran into Arthur, a distinguished gentleman from Maggie's bridge club. Arthur, a widower with a twinkle in his eye, had clearly been harboring a crush on Maggie. "Maggie, my dear," Arthur said, his voice warm, "you look simply radiant today. Any chance you'd be free for a spot of dancing this Saturday at the community hall?" They're having a big band night. Chloe, in Maggie's body, nearly dropped her organic kale. Dancing? With her mother's crush? Her immediate instinct was to politely decline, but then she saw the hopeful look in Arthur's eyes. And she remembered Maggie's own longing for connection, a desire she'd always dismissed as her mother being too sentimental. Maggie deserved a little romance. Arthur, that sounds absolutely delightful. Chloe, as Maggie, responded, her voice sounding surprisingly genuine. I'd love to. She felt a blush rise to Maggie's cheeks, a sensation both unfamiliar and charming. She committed Maggie to a dance, a prospect that both thrilled and terrified her. The incident with Arthur prompted Chloe, as Maggie, to reflect on her mother's emotional life. Maggie, with her strong opinions and often critical demeanor, had always seemed impenetrable. But now, in her body, Chloe felt Maggie's underlying vulnerability, her desire for companionship, her fears of being irrelevant. She realized Maggie wasn't just a judgmental matriarch. She was a woman with her own hopes, dreams, and insecurities. Maggie, too, was undergoing a profound shift in perspective. She spent an afternoon chasing Emma through the woods behind the cabin, playing hide-and-seek, something she hadn't done with her own children in decades. The sheer, unadulterated joy of Emma's laughter, the feeling of mud on Chloe's sneakers, the wind in Chloe's hair, it was invigorating. She saw the world through Emma's imaginative eyes and through Chloe's. She understood the importance of simply being present for her children, something she often chided Chloe for neglecting. She realized Chloe wasn't just obsessed with her phone. She was constantly trying to keep all the plates spinning, and sometimes that meant sacrificing simple moments. During one of their clandestine late-night debriefings held in the privacy of Chloe's bedroom, with the baby asleep, Maggie, as Chloe, and Chloe, as Maggie, began to open up. Honestly, Chloe, Maggie, as Chloe, sighed, wiping baby food from Chloe's chin, your life is a constant marathon. I had no idea how much you juggle. The pressure, the judgment, it's overwhelming. And that phone. It never stops. Chloe, as Maggie, nodded, her voice softer than usual. And Mom, your life isn't just a quiet retirement. There's so much connection, so much community. Anne, Arthur is very charming. But being this age, it's physically demanding. I never considered that. A tentative bridge was forming between them. The anger from their initial argument had dissipated, replaced by a growing empathy. They were starting to see beyond their own perspectives, truly understanding the unique challenges and joys of each other's generation. Harold, who had been unusually silent, opened one eye from his armchair in the living room, a faint smile on his lips. Lessons learned, he mumbled, before drifting back to sleep, completely unaware of the dance date Chloe had just agreed to on Maggie's behalf. The stage was set for an even more chaotic escalation as their borrowed lives pushed them further into unfamiliar territory. The big band night and Emma's parent-teacher conference loomed, promising to test their impersonation skills to their absolute limits. The week built up to a crescendo, Chloe's, now Maggie's, big dance date with Arthur and Maggie's, now Chloe's, parent-teacher conference for Emma. The pressure was immense, threatening to crack their carefully constructed facades. Maggie, in Chloe's body, prepared for the parent-teacher conference with a mixture of dread and a fierce determination. She had spent hours poring over Emma's school reports, trying to understand the modern educational jargon, holistic development, differentiated instruction, growth mindset. It felt like preparing for a corporate merger. She also had to contend with Emma's teacher, Mrs. Albright, a notoriously stern woman known for her keen observational skills. Maggie knew she couldn't afford a single slip-up. She arrived at the school, dressed in Chloe's professional but approachable outfit, a stylish blouse and dark jeans. She felt a phantom tug in her hair, longing for her familiar silver bob, but Chloe's brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She walked into the classroom, the small chairs and colorful posters feeling oddly disorienting. Mrs. Albright, a woman with a severe bun and even more severe glasses, greeted her with a polite but piercing stare. Good afternoon, Chloe, Mrs. Albright said, her voice crisp. Thank you for coming. Emma is a bright student, but we've noticed a few inconsistencies lately. Maggie's heart pounded in Chloe's chest. Inconsistencies, she managed, trying to sound like Chloe, concerned but composed. Mrs. Albright tapped a pen on Emma's folder. Well, for one, her lunch has been quite inventive. Yesterday, she had a deconstructed sandwich that looked suspiciously like a pile of ingredients tossed together. And while her creative writing has flourished with tales of ancient lamps and body-swapping grandmas, her math homework has been a bit traditional. Almost as if an older method was used. She paused, her gaze unwavering. And Emma mentioned that you knew her grandmother's secret smoothie recipe, but didn't know about unicorn sprinkles. Maggie, as Chloe, felt a bead of sweat trickle down Chloe's temple. Oh, Mrs. Albright, parental fatigue. Sometimes things just slip. And a healthy deconstructed sandwich is all the rage these days. She forced a laugh, which sounded a little too high-pitched. She also tried to subtly change the subject, praising Emma's imagination. But Mrs. Albright was relentless. Maggie suddenly understood the immense pressure Chloe felt to be the perfect parent, always on top of everything, always presenting a flawless facade. It was exhausting. Meanwhile, Chloe, in Maggie's body, was preparing for her dance date with Arthur. She felt a mix of nerves and a strange excitement. She had chosen one of Maggie's more elegant, flowing dresses, a deep sapphire blue, and had even dared to apply a touch more makeup than Maggie usually wore, hoping to add a hint of her own youthful vibrancy to Maggie's mature face. She attempted to do Maggie's hair in a slightly looser, more romantic style, but it stubbornly resisted, settling back into its familiar, coiffed shape. She even managed to find a pair of Maggie's low, comfortable heels, knowing her borrowed body wouldn't tolerate anything higher. Arthur arrived, looking dashing in a tailored suit, a single rose in hand. Maggie, my dear, you look absolutely stunning, he said, his eyes full of admiration. Chloe, as Maggie, felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. It was nice to be seen, to be admired, not just as a mother or a professional, but as a woman. Arthur was charming, attentive, and a fantastic conversationalist. They arrived at the community hall, where a live big band was playing classic swing tunes. Shall we? Arthur offered his hand, and Chloe, as Maggie, took it, feeling the warmth of his grasp. As they stepped onto the dance floor, Chloe realized she had no idea how to ballroom dance. Maggie, she knew, was an accomplished dancer. Arthur led, and Chloe, as Maggie, tried to follow, but her younger mind struggled with the intricate steps, and her older body, though still agile for its age, didn't have the muscle memory. She stumbled a few times, stepping on Arthur's foot. "Oh, Arthur, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her voice filled with Maggie's slightly formal apology. "It's quite all right, my dear," Arthur chuckled, gently guiding her. "Perhaps we're a little rusty tonight." Chloe, as Maggie, forced a smile, desperately trying to remember Maggie's graceful movements. She tried to make conversation, interjecting with bits of modern pop culture references that went completely over Arthur's head. "Isn't this band just like a vintage Spotify playlist?" she asked, then immediately regretted it. She realized how much effort Maggie put into her social interactions, how much she valued these connections, and how easily Chloe herself often took her friendships for granted, relying on quick texts and online interactions. She found herself longing for her own friends, her own generation, but also feeling a profound respect for Maggie's ability to cultivate such deep, real-world relationships. Back at the school, Maggie, as Chloe, felt like she was constantly on the verge of being discovered. Mrs. Albright brought up Emma's unusual fascination with an old brass lamp and body-swapping magic. Her eyes narrowed. "Emma seems to have developed a very vivid imagination lately. Do you think there's anything, perhaps, influencing this at home?" Maggie's mind raced. "Oh, just stories, Mrs. Albright. You know how children are. Always making things up." She tried to sound dismissive, but her voice wavered slightly. She felt a profound wave of sympathy for Chloe, for the constant scrutiny, the pressure to maintain a perfect home, perfect children, perfect self. Maggie had always believed parenting was simpler in her day, but now she saw the sheer, unrelenting intensity of modern parenting, the constant judgment from every angle. It was a suffocating weight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the conference ended. Maggie, as Chloe, practically fled the classroom, collapsing against a locker in the deserted hallway, breathing a sigh of immense relief. She had survived. But the experience had left her drained and deeply reflective. She understood now why Chloe was often so harried, so reliant on her phone. It was a lifeline in a world that demanded constant perfection. At the dance, Chloe, as Maggie, found herself enjoying Arthur's company, even if her dancing was less than stellar. They shared stories, laughed, and she felt a genuine warmth towards him. She realized that Maggie, despite her sometimes rigid exterior, deeply valued connection and warmth. She wasn't just old-fashioned, she was looking for meaningful relationships, for joy in her golden years. Chloe realized she had often dismissed her mother's senior activities as boring, but now she saw the richness and vibrancy in Maggie's social life. As the night wound down, Arthur walked Chloe, as Maggie, back to the cabin. He leaned in, a hopeful look in his eyes. "Maggie, I had a truly wonderful time. Would you consider another dance, perhaps next week?" Chloe, as Maggie, felt a pang of conflicting emotions. She liked Arthur, and she knew Maggie would adore another date. But she wasn't Maggie. This was all a temporary illusion. "Arthur," she began, her Maggie voice soft and hesitant, "you are a wonderful man, and I had a lovely time. But I think I need to figure some things out first." She gave him a gentle, regretful smile, hoping he understood. He did, with a slightly disappointed but understanding nod. Back in the cabin, after everyone else was asleep, Maggie, as Chloe, and Chloe, as Maggie, met in the living room, collapsing onto separate sofas, utterly exhausted. "I almost blew it with Mrs. Albright," Maggie, as Chloe, confessed, running Chloe's hand through Chloe's hair. "She's sharper than a tack. And the unicorn sprinkles. Good heavens, the things you have to remember." Chloe, as Maggie, let out a long sigh. "And I almost ruined a perfectly good dance date for you, Mom. Arthur is lovely, but I can't dance ballroom to save my life. And trying to pretend I understand the local gossip, it was brutal." They looked at each other, not with frustration, but with a newfound, shared weariness. The anger and resentment from their argument had evaporated, replaced by a profound sense of understanding and respect. They had truly walked a mile in each other's shoes, through the complexities of modern parenting and the quiet dignity of aging. The climax of their shared ordeal was fast approaching, and with it, the hope of returning to their own lives, forever changed by this extraordinary experience. The lessons were sinking in, deep and irreversible. The family celebration for Harold's 90th birthday was in full swing, a chaotic symphony of chatter, laughter, and the occasional burst of a party popper. The cabin was decorated with streamers and balloons, and a magnificent, albeit gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free, cake sat waiting on the dining table. But beneath the festive veneer, Maggie and Chloe were performing the most elaborate act of their lives, their every move a carefully choreographed dance of deception. Maggie, in Chloe's body, felt a strange mix of accomplishment and anxiety. She had successfully navigated Emma's parent-teacher conference and even managed to keep Chloe's work projects afloat. But the constant pressure was relentless. She felt a profound exhaustion in Chloe's body that went beyond physical fatigue. It was a mental weariness from perpetually being on. She watched Chloe's baby, giggling in a playpen, and a pang of deep love and sympathy for Chloe's daily grind hit her. Chloe was truly a superhero. Chloe, in Maggie's body, felt a similar exhaustion, but it was predominantly physical. Her knees ached, her back throbbed, and she yearned for the boundless energy of her younger self. Yet, she also carried a newfound serenity. She had experienced Maggie's slower pace, her deep community connections, and even the subtle joys of a potential romance with Arthur. She looked at Maggie's friends, chatting animatedly, and saw not just old women, but vibrant individuals with rich lives she had never bothered to fully appreciate. She also caught sight of Arthur, who offered her, as Maggie, a gentle, understanding smile from across the room. The problem, however, was that their carefully constructed charade was starting to fray at the edges. Emma, with her keen observational skills, was becoming increasingly suspicious. She'd watched her mommy Maggie as Chloe give an unexpectedly blunt opinion on modern video games. Back in my day, we played outside, and her grandma Chloe as Maggie expertly scroll through TikTok on Riley's phone to find a specific dance challenge. "Mommy," Emma whispered to Maggie as Chloe, pulling on her sleeve. "How come you knew the secret handshake for Grandma's Bridge Club, but you don't know my favorite cartoon character's name anymore?" Maggie as Chloe stiffened. "Emma, sweetie, there are just too many cartoon characters these days. My brain is full of grown-up things." Riley, who was momentarily off her phone and observing the family dynamics, caught a glimpse of Chloe as Maggie, trying to discreetly adjust the fit of Maggie's dress, an uncharacteristically modern gesture for her grandmother. Then she saw Maggie as Chloe expertly change the baby's diaper with a speed and efficiency she rarely saw from her aunt. The pieces were starting to connect in her teenaged brain. The birthday cake ceremony began. Everyone gathered around Harold, who was, predictably, dozing in his armchair, a party hat askew on his head. The candles were lit, and the family began to sing Happy Birthday. As the song reached its joyful crescendo, Chloe, as Maggie, leaned over to gently nudge Harold awake. "Happy birthday, Grandpa," she said, her voice Maggie's, full of warmth. Harold blinked awake, his eyes clear and surprisingly sharp. He looked at Maggie as Chloe, then at Chloe as Maggie, and a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Well, looks like the chickens have come home to roost," he mumbled, his voice a little clearer than usual. Just then, the baby, still in Maggie's as Chloe's arms, let out a particularly loud gurgle and playfully grabbed a fistful of Maggie's as Chloe's hair. Maggie, reacting purely instinctively, let out a frustrated yelp, a sound that was distinctly Chloe's, but laced with Maggie's exasperated tone. "Good heavens, Chloe, can't you keep a grip on this child for 5 minutes?" she exclaimed, accidentally using Chloe's name and revealing her own in the process. A stunned silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to Maggie as Chloe, who clapped a hand over Chloe's mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Before anyone could process this, Chloe, as Maggie, still standing by Harold, gasped. "Mom, you almost gave it away," she cried out, her voice Maggie's, but her words clearly directed at her daughter. Emma, her eyes wide as saucers, pointed a finger. "Mommy called herself Grandma, and Grandma called herself Mommy." Riley, finally putting down her phone, stared, her jaw dropping. "Oh my God, you guys switched." The secret was out. A cacophony of gasps, exclamations, and bewildered questions erupted. Maggie's sister stared open-mouthed. Chloe's husband, Mark, who had arrived back earlier in the day and had been thoroughly confused by his wife's recent behavior, looked utterly dumbfounded. Arthur looked from one woman to the other, a look of profound bewilderment on his face. Maggie, as Chloe, and Chloe, as Maggie, looked at each other across the stunned silence, the full weight of their public exposure crashing down on them. There was no going back now. It's the lamp," Emma shrieked, pointing dramatically at the ancient brass lamp on the side table, which had begun to glow with a faint, pulsing light. Suddenly, Harold, with a twinkle in his eye, cleared his throat. Everyone turned to him. "Well," he said, his voice surprisingly strong, "I suppose you two have learned your lesson, eh? About walking a mile in someone else's, well, you know." He paused, looking directly at Maggie, as Chloe, and Chloe, as Maggie. "Seems like it's high time you two got back to where you belong." He let out a soft, almost imperceptible chuckle. "You've had your fun. Now, it's time to get back to being yourselves." He then yawned widely, his eyes drooping. "Looks like it's time for this old man's nap again." As Harold's eyes closed, the brass lamp pulsed intensely, bathing the living room in a soft, golden light. Maggie, as Chloe, and Chloe, as Maggie, felt the familiar, disorienting lurch in their stomachs, the strange warping of reality that had accompanied the initial switch. This time, it was stronger, more pronounced. A visible shimmer passed over both women, like heat haze on a summer road. They felt a dizzying sensation, a momentary disorientation, and then a profound sense of rightness. The stiffness in Chloe's body that Maggie had inhabited vanished, replaced by a comfortable familiarity. The aches and pains in Maggie's body that Chloe had endured evaporated, replaced by the youthful springiness she knew so well. The light from the lamp faded, leaving the room in its normal festive glow. Maggie gasped, her own familiar voice escaping her lips. She looked down at her hands, wrinkled, yes, but her hands, with her silver ring. She looked across the room at Chloe, her daughter, standing in her body. Chloe let out a shaky breath, her own voice, clear and young, filling the space. She looked down at her own hands, smooth and strong, and then across at her mother, who was now truly her mother again. They had switched back. They were themselves again. The room was still silent, everyone staring, completely bewildered by what they had just witnessed. Emma was bouncing up and down, pointing and yelling magic. Real magic. Riley, for once, had completely forgotten about her phone, her eyes wide with shock and wonder. Maggie and Chloe stared at each other, then burst into simultaneous, relieved laughter. It was a laugh of pure joy, of exhaustion, of profound understanding. The switch, the chaos, the lessons, it had all led to this moment. They hugged each other tightly, a hug that conveyed years of unspoken emotions, now understood and acknowledged. The journey was over, but its impact had just begun. The immediate aftermath of the switchback was, predictably, pure pandemonium. Maggie and Chloe, now comfortably back in their own bodies, were engulfed by a flurry of shocked questions, gasps, and bewildered stares from the family. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement, convinced she had just witnessed undeniable proof of real magic. Riley, having put her phone down for an unprecedented amount of time, kept repeating, "Did that just actually happen?" Mark, Chloe's husband, finally managed to stammer, "Chloe? Maggie? What on earth just happened?" "My wife has been talking about ancient lamp spirits and making strange TikTok videos all week, and my mother-in-law was suddenly suggesting we go bungee jumping." Maggie, now truly Maggie, looked at Chloe, truly Chloe, and they both burst into laughter again, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. "It's a long story," Mark, Chloe said, her voice still a little shaky, but filled with a new kind of calm. Harold, roused by the commotion, merely opened one eye, surveyed the chaos with a satisfied smirk, and mumbled, "Told you they'd figure it out." Then he promptly drifted back to sleep, leaving the family to grapple with the supernatural revelations. Over the next few days, the cabin became a hub of bewildered discussion. Maggie and Chloe had to recount their experiences, slowly piecing together the events of the week. The viral TikTok videos, the near disasters at the parent-teacher conference, and the dance, the awkward phone calls, it all came tumbling out. The family listened, utterly captivated, half believing and half thinking they'd all gone mad. But for Maggie and Chloe, the switch had fundamentally altered their relationship and their perspectives. Maggie, having lived Chloe's frantic, digitally driven life, found a profound new respect for her daughter. She understood the immense pressure Chloe faced as a modern working mother, juggling career, children, and the relentless demands of a constantly connected world. The loneliness Chloe often felt, despite being surrounded by people, resonated deeply with Maggie. She saw that Chloe's reliance on her phone wasn't laziness, it was a necessary tool for survival in a complex, fast-paced world. "Chloe," Maggie said one morning, her voice softer than it had been in years, "I'm so sorry. I truly had no idea. Your life, it's a marathon. You're incredible." She reached out and squeezed Chloe's hand, a gesture of warmth and genuine admiration. Chloe, having navigated Maggie's calmer, yet physically demanding existence, understood her mother's perspective in a way she never had before. She appreciated the value of community, of slower living, and the wisdom that came with age. She also understood that Maggie's sometimes critical comments often stemmed from a place of deep love and concern, a desire to protect and guide, even if delivered clumsily. She saw her mother not just as a judgmental boomer, but as a woman with her own desires, vulnerabilities, and a rich, full life. "Mom," Chloe replied, her eyes brimming with tears, "I'm sorry too. I always thought you were just stuck in the past. But your life has so much depth, so much real connection. And it's hard. Being older isn't easy." She hugged her mother tightly, a hug filled with newfound understanding. Their bond, once strained by generational differences and unspoken resentments, was now forged anew, stronger and deeper than ever. They had walked a mile in each other's shoes, literally, and the experience had left them with an unshakable empathy. The old brass lamp, which had started it all, was carefully wrapped and placed back in Harold's room. He merely winked at it when no one was looking, a silent conspirator in the family's magical secret. As for the viral TikTok videos Maggie had accidentally created while in Chloe's body, they had become a phenomenon. Chloe's unfiltered rants about modern life had resonated with millions. Now, back in her own body, Chloe looked at the skyrocketing view counts with a mixture of amusement and bemusement. "Mom," Chloe said to Maggie, a mischievous glint in her eye, "you accidentally made me a viral sensation. What do you say we lean into it?" Maggie, surprising herself, grinned. "Well, I suppose I do have a few more thoughts on kids these days that might be relevant to the youth of today." And so, Chloe Dawson's TikTok channel became a joint venture. Maggie, now comfortably back in her 65-year-old body, but with a newfound appreciation for digital media, would appear in videos with Chloe. They recounted their body-swapping adventure, shared their newfound insights, and offered hilarious, heartfelt advice from both generational perspectives. Maggie's blunt, old-school wisdom, combined with Chloe's modern relatability and humor, was a match made in internet heaven. One particular video, titled "My Mom and I Swapped Bodies, and Here's What We Learned," went utterly mega viral, racking up tens of millions of views and becoming a nationwide sensation. It was funny, touching, and surprisingly profound. People loved the raw honesty and the powerful message of cross-generational understanding. Arthur, having heard the full story, bravely asked Maggie on another date. This time, Maggie went, and she even attempted a few ballroom steps, laughing freely when she stumbled. Chloe, for her part, began to put her phone down more often, making a conscious effort to be more present with her children and nurture her real-world friendships. Riley, inspired by the whole magical ordeal, even started a vlog about her family's eccentricities, occasionally featuring her hot grandma and cool mom. Life at the Dawson cabin in Vermont continued, still chaotic, still loving, but now infused with a deeper understanding and a fresh perspective. Maggie and Chloe, forever changed by their magical mishap, had not only found common ground, but had also accidentally become an unlikely source of inspiration, proving that sometimes you just need to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, or body, to truly connect. And it all started with an old lamp, a grumpy grandpa, and a very strong wish.